We're going to talk about a serious subject now, and it's human trafficking. That's the subject. And my guest is Jody Gerritsen. A lot of you probably know Jody. You've probably heard her talk or met her in a variety of different ways, because for 19 years she's been working on the issue of sexual assault in the Tri-Cities. The agency was recently called Sexual Assault Response Center, then they just changed it to Support Advocacy and Resource Center. But today, Jody is here talking from the perspective of the Tri-Cities Coalition Against Trafficking. Jody, thanks so much for showing up today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Because we want to learn all about this. First of all, I need you to define what is human trafficking. What does that mean?
Sure, human trafficking, there can be labor and sex trafficking, and of course today we're talking about sex trafficking. Really the definition to keep in mind is if someone induces someone over the age of 18 into commercial sex by using force, fraud, or coercion, they're trafficking them. And if it's an individual under the age of 18, those tests don't apply, because anyone that has someone engage in commercial sexual activity under 18, they're automatically considered traffickers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the difference between prostitution and sex trafficking.
That can be a really tough one. Many people don't understand that people who may be on the streets prostituting, they might be being trafficked. Within the definition, though, it means there was either force, fraud, or coercion is why they're engaging in that activity. And it might not be obvious to anyone else that they're being forced to prostitute. And so it's really important, I think, for people to be able to open up their minds a bit and not assume if they see someone or hear of someone that has been prostituting, it really might not be by choice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, you know, we have had people in our community working on this topic, this issue, for some time. Is it fair to say at least a decade? Or maybe that too long?
I'm sure there's been some people here and there working on it, but things really started gaining a lot of momentum in the last 2 to 3 years with the coalition.
Okay.
And so a much more organized approach.
All right, and the reason I ask that is because first when people got, I started hearing about people wanting to bring attention to sex trafficking, human trafficking and all, and I was thinking, oh, well, that's nice that they're concerned about people in other countries, far away from us. That's generous of them, but no, we have a problem here. Is that right?
Yes, and I hate to admit, but when it was first being brought to my attention, I didn't understand it either, and I've been at SARC for so many years, and we've seen clients who have been victims of human trafficking, but didn't have the framework or the terminology around it describing exactly what was happening. And so even for staff, we've had to undergo a great amount of education to be able to learn much more about it. And I think that's why we're seeing more victims now, is because people are recognizing them as such.
Mm-hmm. There have been a lot of news stories recently where this specific, I can think of at least 3 in the last 18 months where this has been a direct correlation. People were being abused because of trafficking. Mm-hmm. It happens right here in the Tri-Cities.
Wow, okay. So it's not new. It's always been here. And what are you seeing, or because of your training now, how do you identify things differently than what you used to?
Well, I think what's really helping is now that we have a coalition together, which includes a variety of different disciplines such as law enforcement, prosecutors, the faith community, the Juvenile Justice Center, other service providers such as the Mission Catholic Family Services. Everyone is coming together, and others as well, to be able to coordinate our services and to train one another and figuring out a way how we can identify victims in our community. And in one area right now where we're definitely seeing a difference is with the Juvenile Justice Center, because they have begun a screening process when kids come into the center. And so they're able to, through questions that they ask and through the interactions that they're able to observe, being able to pinpoint kids that might be at risk and being able to give them some additional attention to see if they might be victims in addition to whatever it was that brought them into the center.
Mm-hmm. Well, could you give us some examples in our community? Of course, we're not going to use any names or anything, but I need to understand how much of a problem this is.
Sure. Certainly every case is completely different. There's 3 different types of cases that come to mind that'll maybe show at least the variety, and again, everything is different. One of the first cases that I was aware of was a little girl that we have had as a client. She's 7 now, I believe. We first got her when she was 4. She had been being trafficked by her mom. Her mom would take her little 4-year-old to a hotel and sell both of them to customers and traffic them both. And so that was really kind of my introduction. And so this poor little thing was being, trafficked by her mom. And unfortunate to say, we've had a variety of clients since then who've been trafficked by their own family members, and either to pay rent or to get drugs or whatnot. Trafficking is a low risk and it's high profits. And one thing about trafficking that is different than other type of criminal activities, such as with gangs, renting guns or drugs, the person can be used over and over and over again. And so once someone is sold, they don't have to get a replacement. They can keep using that person, so it's very lucrative. So that's one type. Another type of client we've been seeing is those who have been trafficked now that they're adults and have been hearing about human trafficking and recognizing that it exists and they're not to blame. They had been being trafficked as kids and now coming forward for help. So that would be a similar situation in terms of these also were trafficked by their parents, the ones that I'm thinking of, but they didn't get help when they were little. Not to say help wasn't there, but it wasn't talked about as much. And so now being adults, they recognize that there are agencies and people. And so we have adult survivors coming forward with their stories. And then a lot of what we've been seeing in the papers more, I don't think it's happening more, but I think intervention is a lot of times with the youth who are being trafficked by either really young adults or older adults, either through Craigslist or through Backpage or just out on the streets, which is less common now.
Yes. Wow. I am naive, Jody. I'm naive. This is just wow. It's just hard to accept that this goes on in our own community.
Yeah.
So your goal then is in working with the victims and trying to help them put a life together. Is that it?
Yeah, pretty much. We it's tough. People that have been being trafficked, especially if it's been a situation that's been going on for a great amount of time, it's really hard to be able to get them into a safe place. That's one of the great challenges that we're all facing, because we're not the only individuals working with victims, and it's a great challenge is being able to find a place for them to go that is safe and that actually has a therapeutic component to it. We don't have that locally, and so we need to work with centers across the states to find a place to, when that's necessary, and that's really tough.
Mm-hmm. So first of all is safety, and
Yes.
then what comes after safety?
Really depending on the situation or the individual, it might very well be some of the basics in terms of job skills, financial management skills. Of course, depending, if we're talking about a child, then that might not be the case as much, but we're often looking at drug and alcohol addictions, which is very, very understandable because people are in horrendous situations, and oftentimes those who are trafficking the victims are providing them drugs and alcohol to help keep them a bit more compliant and more difficult for them to be able to break free. And so they can definitely end up with a major problem that way. And because of that, we often see that our youth can have other criminal backgrounds due to the life that they've been put into. And sometimes they are forced to steal, sometimes they might have to, on their own accord, to be able to eat, in order to have clothes, for a variety of reasons. And so sometimes our prosecutors have been great locally too, working with them to help clear up some of the other past criminal activity that has been really more associated with their victimization.
Mm-hmm. If you want to join our conversation, maybe you've got a question for Jody, don't hesitate to call. You can join our conversation at 547-8726, and we're talking about human trafficking. So the coalition that was put together, you have all these different agencies working. Is this, that seems uncommon. Are there most other communities in our state, for example, that have this much attention to human trafficking?
Actually, it is a newer thing. Our counties was in the forefront with about 4 or 5 other sites in the state that had taken up this task to build a coalition and to work collectively on human trafficking. We were the first counties to have a protocol in place, and so that was great. The coalition worked really hard, and so we do now have a local protocol on how to address human trafficking. We have had it in place for a year or two now. It is getting time. We'll need to review it and and tweak it, but it's still at least a great starting point to show the commitment to so many different entities.
Well, what do you mean by protocol? What does that mean?
Some of the sections in the protocol is to help identify the roles and responsibilities of different players, because we all have a different part in this. Another part that is really important is case reviews. What we do is when there has been a victim identified, we call a case review. Anybody can really call for that. It might be my friend's place, Safe Harbor. They have called before and requested case reviews. It could be a law enforcement officer or a prosecutor. And what that means is getting everybody involved or that might be involved in the case together to be able to share information and to help not only on the criminal part. Of course, law enforcement and prosecutors are worried about that, but as well looking at what are the needs of this victim. So how can we put the plan together? The problem is too huge for one entity to really be able to do, so we really have to rely on each other's expertise.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jody, we're going to take a break right here. I'm going to give you that phone number, 547-8726, if you want to join our conversation. When we come back, we're going to talk with Jody about the threshold for conviction of people that are using the services of a person that's being trafficked or the person that is implementing the whole process. I'll ask her about that. Stay with us. This is Meet in the Middle. I'm Christine Brown. Okay. All right, my guest today, Jody Gerritsen. She is representing today the Tri-Cities Coalition Against Trafficking, and we're talking about human sex trafficking primarily. Jody, I want to talk about convictions and all, but first, you thought it was important that we understood some of the average age information. What are we talking about here for young people?
The average age of entry to human trafficking is only 13 years old, and of course, considering that's average, it really shows you how many young people there must be, even younger than that. And then another statistics that is really scary to me is that 7 years is the life expectancy, the average life expectancy once somebody is into trafficking. So it's a very, very dangerous place for someone to be.
Life expectancy, okay. You know, when you first told me that, I thought you were saying the number of years that they spent in it. No, we're talking
Right.
about the end of their life.
Yes.
Oh my, okay, I didn't. Wow, all right. Okay, so there's got to be some bad people in this situation. What's the threshold for convicting them? Is it difficult? I know for different crimes, particularly sex crimes, sometimes that threshold of conviction is a lot higher than other crimes.
Yeah, not being a prosecutor, I certainly can't speak to it with any expertise. What I can say is that they are certainly difficult cases. They're highly complicated. Often we have victims who have been threatened, who have been coerced, who have been manipulated. They have been engaging in, not by choice, but in activities that they feel a lot of shame for, and so it's very difficult for them to come forward and to speak, and they're afraid. And it's also hard to have jurors understand and believe that this type of thing exists. So while I can't really explain a threshold, what I can say is we're very fortunate here in Benton Franklin counties that both of our prosecuting attorneys' offices take it really seriously. I think that we're ahead of many counties and that they're definitely looking at this as criminal activity, and they're also definitely looking at the minors as being victims as opposed to being prostitutes, which is a big shift over the years. And I don't mean specifically here, but in general, it's a shift that is still taking place.
Mm-hmm. Our phone number, 547-8726, if you want to join our conversation. Wow. I didn't realize that this was, I don't know, I guess the underbelly of a community. Things happen that you don't know about. But what, in your experience, do you think as a society, in our own community here, our own community, that we could be doing, that we might be able to ferret out some of these situations earlier than their natural disclosure?
I think that there's been a couple of good examples, again, that's been in the media of hotel managers and owners that have contacted the police because of their concern that something suspicious was going on. When we go and do talks we've talked with the hotel industry, with prosecutors and law enforcement coming, we've done a talk, and they really, law enforcement expresses that if someone sees something out of order, and of course there's training to be had so that individuals will know what to see, but to be able to call the police, to be able to be involved, and that is something I think that we're seeing across the whole sexual assault spectrum, is that a lot of offenders are being caught earlier in their career, and victims are being either coming forward or someone is speaking up earlier, which is great. And I think that's because, kind of like with domestic violence, was so taboo and people didn't speak of it at all, and sexual assault has been that way too, but people are more willing to step up and willing to talk now if they have a concern. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to be having people be educated, and in each industry, sex trafficking might look different. You know, in a hotel, there'd be different things for the hoteliers to be watching for than maybe in the school. And so being sure that you're educated, and calling our agency, we're able to get the right group of people together to come speak, and then being willing to step up if you see something. You don't have to be certain, but being able to raise a concern if you have one.
Oh, okay. So what do you do with that concern? You call police?
Yes, yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
And and people can call the police directly. They don't need to come through another agency. They're very much wanting that type of information because that's the only way they're going to get it, is by people coming forward and sharing that.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that the coalition, and I know certainly your agency, Support Advocacy and Resource Center, does a lot of speaking engagements and talking.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you do these kinds of talks? I know you go into the schools. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
With teachers or students or what?
Yeah, we worked with again with law enforcement and prosecutors, talking at the hotelier function to talk to those in hotels to help train them. And there's going to be some additional training outside the state coming in. We've also talked to the medical society in order to talk to doctors and first responders to be able to see some things that they could be on the lookout for. We've been to a variety of churches, so talking to the faith community, and which is really helpful. And in the schools, in the last few years, we have altered the prevention that we provide in the schools so that we're able to discuss this topic as well. And then, so not only with the students, which I was just referencing, but then also we've gone in and talked to the adults as well, as far as the counselors or the teachers. Really anywhere that someone would like to have some more education, we'll absolutely go. And if we're not the right person at SARP, we'll definitely connect them to who they need.
Yeah, so I can see the benefit is not necessarily of speaking directly to victims, but it's speaking to other people who might be somehow associated to a victim or see something. Yeah, so
Yeah, you have
that's
to
a wide.
get it from every
Yeah.
every angle. And so in the schools, certainly we're hoping to be able to help prevent some by having the kids, and certainly the younger they are, be able to maybe recognize some of these ploys as they might be confronted with them. But then also, if they could be engaged in trafficking and be at school. That definitely happens. So we might be speaking to victims and not knowing it at that time. Or also for their friends in the school system that might recognize that they have a concern about their friend to step forward to.
Yeah. Well, what makes people vulnerable to being a victim of sex trafficking? I'm not talking about young children who are at the hands of their parents often, but I'm talking about other maybe young adults
Sure.
or teenagers that have left home or whatever.
There's definitely, there's not one type of person that's your trafficking victim in terms of demographics, race or anything like that. However, the vulnerability factor is huge. If we're talking with teens, their youth in and of itself makes them much more vulnerable. Teen minds are much more likely to be manipulated and coerced. One thing you might hear about a lot is the older boyfriend who's coming in and saving the day, whether it be from problems at home, problems at school, whatever problems this teen may be having, and promise to take care of this person, promise to buy them clothes, promise to love them, all of this, and really it's all just a trick to get the trust and to get the person away from any support that they might have. And then they can quickly turn them out, and then once they've done it once, the relationship definitely has changed. And then for that person to be able to get out is not so easy. They'll threaten them, they'll tell them, they'll show their parents, or they'll tell police, and there's often a lot of times violence used as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another factor that's definitely high risk is for our youth that are either runaways or throwaways, so they're on the street. They're at particular high risk because they're not having their basic needs met. Survival sex is something we've been seeing more about our agency, where someone will trade sex for food, sex for shelter, and if we're talking a youth and an adult, it's still trading something of value commercially, so it's still considered trafficking. But survivor sex is a term that we're starting to hear more about.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this is a big, big topic. And Jody, thank you so much for joining us today and just giving us an overview of it. But boy, people, if you are in some kind of an organization or a group and you think that you would benefit by your people knowing this information, I would suggest that you look up the Tri-Cities Coalition Against Trafficking. Just do a Google search of it. You'll find their website. You'll be able to get a hold of Jody or anybody else in the group and maybe come and do a talk. The more that people are educated about something, that seems the most powerful tool that we can use in our community. Jody, thank you so much, and thank you for 19 years, woman. You're
Great, thank you.
appreciated. Yeah, thank you. We'll be back to wrap this Monday up in just a moment. Stay with us.